and then it goes completely, absolutely still. Not quiet, still. There is a difference, and I have only learned it here, in this room, under these lights. Quiet is what you have in an empty church, or at the edge of a lake at dawn. Still is what happens when 30 people hold their breath at the same time because they are watching something they do not have a word for yet. My biological mother is sitting 11 feet away from me. I know the exact distance because I counted the floor tiles when the bailiff asked everyone to rise. 11 ivory tiles. Each one roughly 12 inches square. I needed something to measure, something that would not look back at me. She does look back at me. She has not stopped. Her stare is not angry. That would be easier. It is the stare of a woman cataloging a problem she thought she had already solved. I am 31 years old. I am wearing the blazer my real mother, the one who chose me, pressed last night at 11:30 p.m. because she said, "You show up to your own life like it matters, Chloe," because it does. The collar is perfect. The woman 11 feet away does not notice the collar. She is looking at my eyes, searching for the girl she remembers. Small, apologetic, grateful for the scraps of being included. She will not find her. That girl dissolved a long time ago in rooms this woman will never know existed. 8 years prior, late November, the family home. My sister Daniela called it a hard conversation. That is what she said when she sat me down at the kitchen table where we had eaten every Christmas dinner of our lives. "Chloe, we need to have a hard conversation." She had her hands folded. She looked like she was delivering a diagnosis. In a way, I suppose she was. The story she told me was this. Our father's business had collapsed. Not slowly, the way businesses sometimes do, quietly hemorrhaging until there is nothing left, but catastrophically, publicly. There were creditors. There were journalists who were starting to ask questions. There was a particular investor, powerful enough to make or destroy what remained of the family's reputation, who had one condition for his continued silence. He was, apparently, a deeply conservative man. He had heard things. He knew about the year I left home for the city, the friends I kept, the life I was building. He had decided that I was a liability, a stain. My family agreed with him. Daniela did not say we agreed with him. She said, "It would be better, for everyone, if you stepped back from the family, publicly, just for a while." I asked her what a while meant. She looked at her folded hands. She did not answer. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, someone's car drove past and the headlights crossed the ceiling like a slow, indifferent eye. I left that night with a duffel bag and the strange, airless calm of someone who has just survived an explosion but has not yet felt the heat. Within 3 months, I had been removed from every photograph on the family's social media. A decade of birthdays, Christmases, graduations, digitally excised, cropped out, replaced. Daniela's wedding photos from 2 years prior were re-edited. In the new version, I am simply not there. There is a slight blur near the left side of one image, a ghost smear where the editing was imprecise, and that blur is the only evidence I was ever a daughter in that house. I became, officially, a person my family had never had. They were very thorough about it. I did not yet know how thorough. The thing about being erased is that at first, you almost cooperate with it. You are so trained to make yourself small, so practiced at the art of not being inconvenient, that the erasure feels almost voluntary. Almost. It took me 4 years to stop checking Daniela's Instagram for the blur. It took me 2 more to stop dreaming about that refrigerator hum. It took a stranger, a lawyer I had never met, sitting across from me in a coffee shop on a Tuesday afternoon, to understand that what my family had done was never informal. It was never a while. It was a process. Legal, deliberate, and dated. The paperwork had been filed, quietly, through a firm none of us children had ever heard of, before Daniela even sat me down at that kitchen table, before the hard conversation, before I packed the duffel bag. They had begun the process of disowning me before they told me I was being asked to leave. The lawyer slid a document across the table. I remember the sound it made on the laminate, a dry whisper, like something being erased. She pointed to a date at the top, and I realized, sitting there with my untouched coffee going cold, that my parents hadn't just decided to let me go. They had decided something far worse. They had built a legal architecture designed to ensure that if I ever tried to come back, for an inheritance, for a claim, for anything, I would have no ground to stand on, none at all. And the document she was showing me wasn't the end of it. It was, she said carefully, only the first one she had found. There were 3 documents. That is what the lawyer told me that Tuesday afternoon, with my coffee going cold between my hands like a small, useless stone. 3 separate filings, each one a different instrument of the same intention. The first was a formal declaration of estrangement, filed with a notary and 2 witnesses I had never met. The second was an amendment to my father's estate documents, drafted 11 days before Daniela sat me down at the kitchen table. The third, and this is the one that made the room tilt slightly, the one that made me set down the coffee because I was afraid of what my hands might do. The third was a petition to have my birth certificate annotation altered, a clerical erasure. They had tried to make my belonging to them a thing that could be corrected, like a typo. The petition had been denied. Some clerk somewhere, a person I will never know, had stamped it insufficient grounds and filed it away, and because of that anonymous refusal I still technically, legally, existed as their daughter. That is the only reason we are in a courtroom today. That denial is the crack in the wall they built, and I have spent the last 2 years learning to fit a case through it. They tried to unmake me on paper. They almost succeeded. What they did not account for was how good I had become by then at surviving things that were almost. Years 1 through 3, 3 cities, 7 apartments. I want to be careful about how I describe what came next, because it is very easy, in retrospect, to make those years sound cinematic, heroic. The lone woman forging herself in the fire of abandonment. It was not like that. It was mostly very quiet and very boring and interrupted occasionally by moments of such acute, physical loneliness that I would find myself standing in a grocery store holding a can of soup I didn't need, just to have a reason to stand near other people. I was a ghost, not metaphorically, practically. My emergency contact on every form I filled out was a college acquaintance named Priya who barely knew me, because she was the only person I trusted not to call my family if something went wrong. My tax returns went to a P.O. box. I did not go to a doctor for 14 months, because I was afraid that if something were seriously wrong, there would be no one to call. I worked. I was very good at working. I had inherited, from my father's side, a particular talent for making myself indispensable in professional rooms, and I used that talent the way a person uses a flashlight in a power cut. Not to see everything, just to see the next step. I did not make friends easily. I was too careful. Every time someone got close, I found a reason to create distance, because I had learned, at a cellular level, that closeness was a prelude to the specific kind of loss that does not announce itself. It just removes you from the photograph. Year 4. A dinner party. I tried to leave early. I met them at a dinner party I had not wanted to attend, thrown by a colleague I liked well enough to feel guilty about avoiding. Her name was Renata, and she had the particular gift of people who genuinely cannot imagine why anyone would not want to be in a room full of other people. I arrived 40 minutes late, planning to stay an hour. I left 9 hours later, at 2 in the morning, having missed the last train and been offered the spare room by a couple I had known for less than a day. Their names are Margaret and Frank. I call them Mom and Dad now, but that took 18 months, and an argument, and a long, tearful phone call at midnight on a Tuesday. And I want to honor the full length of that journey rather than skip to the ending. What I knew about them that first night was this. They asked me questions and then listened to the answers. Completely. Without scanning the room, without waiting for their turn to speak, without the faint glaze behind the eyes that means a person has already decided how to respond before you have finished talking. Margaret asked me what I did for holidays. I said truthfully that I usually worked. She looked at me in a way that was not pitying. I would have retreated from pity immediately, but alert. Like she had heard something underneath the sentence. She did not push. She simply said, "Well, you're welcome here whenever." I was welcome there at Christmas that year, and the next, and the next. It took me a long time to trust a door that did not move. I kept waiting for the condition, the footnote, the quiet conversation at the kitchen table where someone would fold their hands and tell me what I was costing them by being fully myself. It never came. After 3 years, I stopped waiting. After 5, I stopped being surprised. After 7, I let myself call it home without putting the word in mental quotation marks first. That is the kind of love that has to be learned. My biological parents had given me no grammar for it. Margaret and Frank taught me the language from the beginning. One holiday, one Sunday dinner, one midnight phone call at a time. By the time the adoption conversation came up, tentative, late at night, with all 3 of us pretending to watch something on television, I already knew the answer. I had known it for years. I just hadn't said it out loud yet, because saying it out loud meant it was real, and real things, I had discovered, could be taken away. The adoption paperwork was 6 weeks from being finalized. 6 weeks. I had started to let myself imagine the moment. The signature, the judge's nod, the new page in a document somewhere that said, officially, irrevocably, she belongs. And then my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize, from an area code I had spent 7 years trying to forget. I answered it, because I am still, in spite of everything, the kind of person who answers. The voice on the other end was not my mother. It was not my father. It was a lawyer I had never spoken to, representing interests he would not yet name, informing me that my biological parents had become aware of my pending adoption, and that they intended to contest it. 6 weeks before the hearing. A hotel lobby. Neutral ground. Their choice. My biological parents did not contest the adoption because they wanted me back. I want to be precise about that, because the narrative a court prefers, the one that plays better, that makes the opposing counsel's eyes go soft, is the story of parents who realized too late what they had thrown away. That is not this story. My grandfather died 14 months before that phone call. He left behind an estate, modest by most measures, significant by ours, with one condition woven into the language of his will that his own son, my father, had apparently never expected to matter. The inheritance dispersed equally among all living children and their legal descendants. Everyone. No exclusions. My grandfather, it turned out, had known exactly what my parents had tried to do. He had simply declined to cooperate with it posthumously. If my adoption was finalized, I would have no legal claim to my biological family's share. The math was straightforward. Contesting the adoption was not about me. It was about removing me from a calculation before the calculation was made permanent. They had discarded me when I was a liability. They were contesting me now because I had accidentally become an asset. The cruelty was not in the motive. It was in how little had changed. In the weeks before the hearing, I started checking my locks twice. Not because I thought they would come to my home, but because the body does not distinguish between types of threat. My nervous system had a file on these people labeled danger, and it did not care that the danger was now legal rather than emotional. It simply activated. I slept badly. I ate at strange hours. I jumped at sounds in the hallway that turned out to be neighbors, pipes, nothing. Margaret noticed. She said nothing for 4 days, which is how I knew she was being careful with me. On the 5th day, she drove 40 minutes to bring me soup I hadn't asked for, and she sat at my kitchen table. Not the kitchen table, my kitchen table, in my apartment, the one I had chosen. And she said, "You don't have to be okay. You just have to show up." I held that sentence like a handhold for the next 6 weeks. 11 days before the hearing, the hotel lobby meeting. They arrived together, my biological parents, which surprised me. I had expected my father to send someone, a lawyer, a representative, anyone who was not himself. Instead, they sat down across from me in upholstered chairs, and my mother ordered tea she didn't drink, and my father laid a manila envelope on the table and said they were prepared to make this simple. Drop the adoption. Walk away from Margaret and Frank's petition. In exchange, a settlement, private, undisclosed, enough to be meaningful. They called it a gesture of goodwill. I called it, silently, what it was. I told them I needed a moment. I picked up the envelope, and inside, beneath the settlement figures, beneath the legal language was something else entirely. A single page that had nothing to do with money, and everything to do with why they were so certain I would sign. It was a photograph, not the kind you frame, the kind you keep because you intend one day to use it. It was of me, from a period of my life I had survived and never discussed, and the note clipped to it said only, "We would hate for this to complicate things." My mother was watching my face the way she had watched it in the courtroom, cataloging. My father was looking at the table. Neither of them saw what they expected to see, because the person sitting across from them was not the girl they had deleted from the photographs, and I knew something they did not. That secret was no longer mine alone to carry. The courthouse. 8:47 a.m., 13 minutes before the hearing. The secret was no longer mine alone because I had told Margaret. That is the resolution, and I want to sit in it for a moment before the day itself swallows everything else. I had driven to her house the night after the hotel lobby meeting, and I had sat at her kitchen table, and I had told her all of it. The photograph, the note, The years the image had belonged to. The version of me I had been most ashamed of. The version I had worked hardest to outrun. I told her without softening a single edge of it. She listened, completely, in the way she always listened. And when I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "That's not a weapon, that's just your life." 4 words that did more structural damage to my shame than 7 years of quietly carrying it had ever done. I drove home steadier than I had arrived. The photograph stopped being a threat the moment it was witnessed by someone who did not flinch. The courthouse hallway is the kind of space designed to make you feel small. High ceilings, floors that echo, benches along the walls where people sit with their hands between their knees and look at nothing. I was standing near the window at the far end, watching the street below, when I heard her heels. I knew the sound of them before I turned around. I had grown up with that particular rhythm, purposeful, metered, the walk of a woman who had decided in advance how every room would receive her. My biological mother stopped close enough that I could smell her perfume. The same one, 11 years, and the same perfume. I do not know why that detail hit as hard as it did. Something about the continuity of it. That she had changed nothing, adjusted nothing, while I had rebuilt myself almost entirely from different materials. She did not raise her voice. She never raised her voice. That was always the most frightening thing about her. The damage she could do at a whisper. "You're no one's daughter now." Biological mother, courthouse hallway, 8:51 a.m. She said it the way you state a fact you find mildly inconvenient. Then she turned and walked back toward the courtroom doors, heels precise on the marble, and I stood at the window and felt the sentence land in every room I had ever been small in simultaneously. I will not pretend it did not work for a moment. That is the honest accounting. For approximately 90 seconds and standing at that window, I believed her. Not because the sentence was true, but because it was old. It had the weight of a thing that had been said in 100 different ways across my entire childhood. Quietly, through omission, through the photos that got cropped and the documents that got filed and the kitchen table conversation where my sister folded her hands. The words were new. The belief behind them was ancient, and ancient things, when they surface, do not ask your permission first. 90 seconds. I gave her 90 seconds of my nervous system. Then I thought of Margaret pressing my blazer at 11:30 at night, and I straightened my collar and I walked toward the doors. The bailiff pulled them open from the inside. The courtroom was fuller than I expected. Our side, their side, and then a third cluster near the back that I could not immediately place. The judge settled her papers. She looked up, scanned the room, and asked the question that every adoption hearing begins with. "Who is here to speak for the petitioner?" The room had been quiet, and then, from somewhere behind me, a chair scraped the floor. And then another, and then another. I did not turn around right away. I closed my eyes for 1 second first, because I already knew, I had always known, that when I opened them, I would not be standing alone. The courtroom, 9:03 a.m. I opened my eyes. There were 11 of them. I counted later, from the photograph someone took in the hallway afterward, because in the moment I could not count anything. I could only stand there while the room recalibrated around the fact of them. 11 people rising from the gallery benches in a slow, deliberate wave, one after another, like a sentence being said 1 word at a time so that every syllable lands. Margaret was first. She stood the way she did everything. Without announcement, without performance, with the certainty of a woman who has made a decision and sees no reason to revisit it. Frank rose beside her, his hand briefly touching the back of her chair, and that small gesture. The tenderness of it, the absolute ordinariness of it, undid something in me I had been keeping carefully constructed for weeks. Then Renata. Then David. Then Gloria, my therapist of 6 years, who had never before attended anything outside her office, and whose presence told me everything about what she believed was at stake. Then 5 more, whose faces I will keep for the rest of my life. On the other side of the aisle, my biological mother was very still. She was looking at the 11 people behind me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It took me a moment to name it. It was the expression of someone who has miscounted. Our attorney dismantled the contest in 4 precise movements. The inheritance motive, established through the estate documents and my grandfather's will, made the timeline of their actions inescapable. The birth certificate petition was entered as evidence of premeditation. The photograph from the hotel lobby was reframed as what it legally was, attempted coercion. Their counsel tried twice to redirect. Both times the judge stopped him with a look I hope to remember forever. They had built a legal architecture to erase me. Our attorney walked into it, found every load-bearing wall, and removed them one by one until the structure stood exposed for what it always was, a house with nothing inside. The judge reviewed the final documents in silence. Then she said that the court found no credible basis for the contest, and that the record showed clearly and without ambiguity that the petitioner had built a life, a community, and a family through intention and choice, and that the law, at its best, existed to recognize what was already true. The adoption is confirmed. The petitioner's name is amended accordingly. This matter is closed. Family Court, 11:14 a.m. I heard Margaret exhale behind me, the smallest sound, the loudest thing in the room. 18 months later, my biological parents did not appeal. Daniela sent a message 8 months ago. 3 sentences. I have read it many times and I am still deciding what it means, and I think that is all right. Some things do not resolve on a schedule. Last December, Margaret and Frank hosted Christmas. 14 people at the table. A photograph was taken. I am in it, uncropped, unedited, seated between the two of them with my face doing the unguarded thing that faces do when they have finally, without reservation, arrived somewhere. Legal name, confirmed by court order, Chloe Margaret Adiemi Walsh. She is 31 years old. She locks her door once. She keeps the Christmas photograph on the wall of her hallway. Not as a statement, but as a fact. A quiet, permanent fact. She is someone's daughter. She always was. It just took the right people to know it first, and the right courtroom to say it out loud.